The star map and the lantern. Somewhere between waking and dreaming, there is a place where silence floats like mist, and time moves as slowly as a lullaby. It was here, in the soft cradle of night, that Mira found herself again. She had always been a quiet soul, thoughtful, curious, gentle. But sleep had been elusive lately, slipping past her like waves through her fingers. Until one night, when everything changed. It began in her room, quiet and dim, with only the moonlight casting silver shapes on the wall. As Mira closed her eyes, something shifted. The hush in the air deepened, the bed softened beneath her, and she found herself not in her bedroom, but standing barefoot in a warm field of stars. Yes, a field. Not grass, not soil, but glowing stars. Each one shimmered under her feet, soft and cool, like walking on memory. Above her, the sky was a deep, endless indigo. The stars there shimmered too, but differently, like they were watching, guiding. In front of her stood a stone pedestal, ancient and worn, and resting upon it was a scroll, neatly tied with midnight blue ribbon. Mira stepped forward slowly. She untied the ribbon and unrolled the parchment, and her breath caught. It was a map. But not of any land she knew. This map had no countries, no cities. Instead, it held floating isles, drifting paths of mist, glowing moons, and archways made of stardust. The lines connecting each place pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. In the corner of the map, a single note was written in silver script. This is your voyage, Mira. One island each night. Let your breath be your compass. Your lantern will show the way. Just as she read the words aloud in a whisper, a light bloomed beside her. She turned to find a small lantern rising slowly from the starlit field. It hovered in the air like a firefly, flickering with soft, golden light. Inside it, instead of a candle, was a single glowing droplet of moonlight, suspended in stillness. The lantern drifted closer, then gently circled around her before settling into her open palm, weightless and warm. Mira looked again at the map, which had folded itself neatly, as if ready for a journey. She tucked it against her chest, feeling its hum, a quiet promise, and began walking. As she stepped through the starlit field, the world around her began to shift again. The stars beneath her feet faded into clouds. The wind became a lullaby. And a boat, carved from what looked like driftwood and silver, appeared at the edge of a gentle fog. Without a word, she climbed in. The lantern floated beside her, casting a calm circle of light on the dream sea. The map glowed softly in her hand. And the boat began to glide forward, soundless and smooth. Mira exhaled slowly, her breath matching the rhythm of the waves. She didn't know what awaited her beyond the mist. But something in her heart whispered that each step, each island, would bring her closer to peace. Closer to stillness. Closer to the sleep she had longed for. And so, with the stars behind her and her lantern glowing beside her, Mira's voyage began. One dream. One breath. At a time. Crescent moon. The driftwood dock. The boat glided gently across the dream sea, so quietly that Mira could hear the hush of her own breath as it slowed to match the rhythm of the waves. The water below was unlike any ocean she'd known. It was smooth as silk and glimmered with soft hues of lavender and moonlight gold. It didn't splash or churn, it simply moved, like a breath drawn in and let go again. The surface shimmered with constellations, as though the stars above had cast their reflections down to keep her company. Mira sat in silence, one hand resting gently on her lap, the other loosely holding the floating lantern. Its glow was steady, warm, golden, and calm, as though the light itself were breathing with her. The silver map lay curled at her feet, but she didn't need to look at it just now. The boat seemed to know the way. Overhead, the sky deepened into velvety indigo, with wisps of misty cloud stretching lazily across the stars. Mira felt a peaceful heaviness in her limbs, like the kind that comes just before sleep. The rocking of the boat, the quiet air, the soft twinkle of stars, everything was slow, gentle, and safe. Ahead, a shape began to form out of the distance. First, just a thin line across the horizon. Then, slowly, it grew into something clearer, the outline of an island, floating like a dream just above the waves. And at its edge was a dock, but not like any dock she had ever seen. It was made entirely of driftwood, not aged or broken, but graceful and sculpted, as if each piece of wood had been chosen by the wind. The planks glowed faintly, their grains shining with starlight. Lanterns just like Mira's were perched on wooden posts along the path, their flames flickering without ever needing to burn. The boat slowed without any help from Mira, and with the gentlest bump, it pressed itself to the side of the dock, rocking softly in farewell. Mira stood, her feet finding the dock with ease. The wood felt warm and smooth beneath her bare soles, as if it had been resting in sunlight for 1,000 years. She looked up. Beyond the dock, the island waited. It wasn't grand or imposing, it was welcoming. Gentle hills rolled like waves, topped with trees that shimmered faintly in shades of silver and green. Flowers bloomed beside the path, their petals glowing with soft pastel light, blues and pinks and buttery yellow, each swaying ever so slightly even though there was no wind. The air smelled faintly of lavender, and something sweeter, like the inside of a memory. The lantern in her hand pulsed gently, inviting her to move forward. She took a step. Then another. With each one, her shoulders relaxed a little more. The tension she didn't even know she was carrying began to soften. It felt like the island knew she was coming, and had been waiting. As she reached the end of the dock, Mira turned to glance back at the boat. It hadn't left. It simply drifted a little farther down the shore, quietly bobbing in place, as if to say, "I'll be here when you're ready." Mira smiled softly and turned back to the path ahead. The first island was ready to share its secrets. And so, lantern in hand, map pressed against her chest, and heart wide open, Mira stepped into her first dreamland. The soft crunch of driftwood beneath her. The hush of the sea behind her. And before her, a path made not just of light, but peace. Crescent moon. The island of floating books. Mira followed the path away from the driftwood dock, her lantern casting a golden circle around her feet as she walked. The earth beneath her was soft and mossy, like walking across a bed made just for her footsteps. Gentle hills curved like sleepy sighs in the land, and trees arched gracefully toward the sky, their leaves shimmering with silver tips as if they were painted by starlight. A low mist hugged the ground, curling around Mira's ankles like a slow-moving stream. It wasn't cold or damp, it was more like a soft whisper, reminding her that she was safe, and she was exactly where she needed to be. Ahead, a gentle curve in the path opened into a clearing. And in the clearing, books floated. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. They drifted in midair, each one glowing faintly, not blinding or bright, but soft like fireflies. Some were large, like ancient tomes wrapped in leather and velvet. Others were tiny, as light as feathers, fluttering gently like leaves in the breeze. They moved slowly, like they were dancing, up, then down, a graceful waltz of words and dreams. Mira gasped softly, awed by the sight. She took a careful step into the clearing. The floating books did not scatter or fall. Instead, a few of them turned toward her, as if acknowledging her presence. One book, small and blue with a silver clasp, drifted closer and paused just in front of her, hovering at shoulder height. Mira reached out, her fingers barely brushing the cover. It opened on its own. The pages were blank for a moment, then words began to appear, written in silvery ink. But they weren't printed, they moved and shimmered, like they were being whispered by the page itself. The story it told was simple. It was about a rainy afternoon. A young child curled up under a blanket, holding a cup of cocoa, reading their favorite book as soft thunder rolled in the distance. Their mother was in the kitchen, humming a lullaby and baking something warm. The smell of cinnamon filled the air. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't epic. It was peaceful. It was safe. It was love in its quietest form. Mira felt a tear trace a soft path down her cheek, not from sadness, but from recognition, the feeling that even the smallest moments of comfort were worth remembering forever. The book closed slowly and floated upward again, back into its gentle dance with the others. Another one came forward, green this time, with a ribbon bookmark that moved like a soft breeze. Mira read again. This story was of an old man sitting beneath a cherry blossom tree, watching petals fall while holding his wife's hand. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence between them was filled with decades of understanding, and the only sound was the quiet rustle of spring. Every book in the clearing held a memory like this, not hers, but someone's. Moments of stillness, calm, and gentle joy. The entire island seemed to be a library of peace. Mira wandered deeper into the clearing, occasionally reading a floating book, sometimes just watching them twirl and sway in the air. Eventually, she lay down on a bed of moss beneath the books, the lantern floating beside her like a watchful moon. Above her, the glowing pages turned in silence, casting soft shadows that moved like lullabies. She closed her eyes, letting the stories float over her, their calm soaking into her skin. And in that moment, Mira understood. This island wasn't just about reading. It was about remembering that comfort exists, everywhere, in the quietest corners of the world and in the softest pieces of the past. With a peaceful breath, she drifted. Not asleep, not awake. Just floating gently, like the books above her. Held. Loved. And completely at ease. Crescent moon. The breath of the sea. When Mira gently opened her eyes again, the glowing books had returned to their silent waltz above the mossy clearing. Her lantern, ever faithful, floated by her side with a soft hum. Though time didn't feel real here, Mira knew, without doubt, that it was time to continue. The moment she stood, the lantern began drifting toward the edge of the glade. Mira followed, trusting it as she always did, as one might trust a lullaby to lead them softly to sleep. Beyond the trees, the path curved into a narrow walkway of smooth stone, pale as moonlight. As she walked, the air began to change, growing cooler, moister, laced with the scent of salt and something fresh. The hush of waves whispered in the distance, rhythmic and deep, like the world breathing. At the end of the path was a wide cliff ledge overlooking the sea. But it was not any ordinary sea. This ocean shimmered with impossible colors, lavender foam, turquoise light dancing on the surface, and waves that rose and fell with a slow, mesmerizing grace. There were no crashing sounds, no winds. Only the gentle pull and release, in, out, like the sea itself was in meditation. Nestled into the curve of the cliff was a stone staircase, winding downward. Mira descended. As she reached the bottom, the sea opened up before her, vast, serene, and welcoming. A crescent-shaped beach curved gently like a cradle, the sand cool and soft beneath her feet, glowing with a silvery hue. The tide whispered over the shore in soothing sighs. At the water's edge stood something unexpected. A large seashell, tall as Mira herself, with an open hollow like a chamber. It pulsed faintly with golden light. Drawn to it, she stepped inside. The shell's interior was warm and echoing, filled with a hum that resonated with her bones. She sat down on a cushion of sea grass, soft and fragrant like mint and morning dew. As soon as she settled, the hum became clearer, not a sound, but a rhythm. The breath of the sea. In. A gentle rise. Out. A slow fall. The shell was teaching her how to breathe again. Not just with her lungs, but with her entire being. Inhale. Like drawing in light and calm. Exhale. Like releasing every thought, every weight, every leftover noise of the waking world. She matched the rhythm of the sea. In. out. Slow. Soothing. Effortless. Her lantern floated just outside the shell, casting ripples of golden light across the sand. And as Mira sat in the warm echo of the sea's breath, the air itself began to change. Tiny lights, like sea stars, shimmered just above the waves. Some glided across the surface, others drifted through the air. They weren't creatures. They were memories of calm. Of stillness. Of release. Mira closed her eyes. And in the breath of the sea, she felt the world inside her grow quiet. Her shoulders loosened. Her mind softened. And in this sacred rhythm, rise and fall, she found something she hadn't felt in a long time. Stillness. Not the stillness of silence, but the stillness of peace. The shell vibrated softly with her every breath. The ocean replied in kind, holding her in its rhythm, its grace. And Mira simply breathed. Like the sea. Like the stars. Like sleep itself. Crescent moon. The bridge of feathers. When Mira finally emerged from the seashell chamber, her heart beat with the calm rhythm of the sea. Each breath she took still matched the gentle sway of the tide. Her footsteps felt lighter now, as if her worries had been carried off by the waves themselves. The path from the beach curved upward again, not steep, but rising steadily like a lullaby growing softer with each note. As she climbed, the sea disappeared behind her and the sky opened wider, brushing the tops of the tallest trees with golden light. Mira noticed something shimmering ahead. A flock of birds circled slowly above her, graceful, silent creatures with wings like silk and tails that glowed faintly in the sky. They weren't flapping like ordinary birds, they glided, suspended by the breeze, their feathers trailing soft ribbons of color, pale pinks, silvers, blues, and white. One bird, larger than the others, landed on a rock just ahead. It had feathers like moonlight and eyes that looked as though they held ancient dreams. Mira paused. The bird tilted its head, then spread one wing toward the edge of the cliff. That's when she saw it. A bridge. But not of stone or wood. The bridge was made entirely of feathers, layer upon layer woven together, floating just above the clouds. It had no visible support, no railings, and no beginning or end that she could see, only an invitation. Mira stepped forward. The feathers didn't crunch or shift beneath her feet. Instead, they adjusted gently to her weight, cradling her with each step. The bridge undulated slightly like a living thing, swaying with the breeze yet holding her safely. As she walked, the air around her changed again. Above her, the sky was an endless dome of lavender and pearl. Below her, clouds billowed in silence, soft and dreamy. The world she had come from was hidden now, all that remained was sky, feathers, and flight. From the clouds, more birds emerged. Each carried something in its beak, tiny glowing orbs, like bubbles of light. Mira stopped to watch. One bird flew beside her and dropped a glowing orb into her hands. It hovered above her palm, warm and gentle. Inside the orb, she saw a memory, not hers, but someone's. A grandmother humming softly as she braided her granddaughter's hair. A boy swinging lazily beneath a tree in summer, his eyes closed to the sun. A couple watching the stars from the roof of a tiny cabin, fingers entwined. The bird chirped softly and released another orb. Then another. One by one, Mira was surrounded by memories. She realized the bridge wasn't just a way forward, it was a crossing made of remembered peace. Each feather held a story of calm. Each bird, a messenger of forgotten dreams. And Mira was being reminded of all the gentleness the world still held. The larger bird, the one who had guided her, circled above, and then descended beside her once more. This time, it lowered its head, and Mira instinctively reached out. Her fingers brushed a small pendant tied around its neck, a delicate charm shaped like a tiny door. The bird leaned into her hand for just a moment, then stepped back. In that instant, the bridge of feathers shifted. Ahead of Mira, a doorway of mist formed in midair. Not a wall, not a gate, just a shimmer, like the ripple of heat over summer pavement. It pulsed softly, waiting. Mira took one last breath, the sea still in her lungs, the sky in her eyes, and walked forward. As she stepped through the veil, the feather bridge slowly faded behind her, not vanishing, but blending into the clouds like it had always been part of the sky. And she, too, became a part of it, lighter than air, guided by birds, and filled with the memory of stillness. She didn't look back. Because ahead of her was the next dream. Waiting. Soft. And ready to unfold. Crescent moon. The clockmaker's garden. As Mira stepped through the soft mist beyond the bridge of feathers, the world around her shifted once more. The sky, once wide and pale, dimmed gently into twilight. Crickets began to chirp, not urgently, but softly, a lullaby stitched into the breeze. Her feet met cobbled ground, smooth and warm beneath her soles. She stood at the entrance of a walled garden, its gate made of twisting vines, curled delicately around an archway of copper and moss. The lantern floated by her side, brighter now in the dusk. The gate creaked open as if expecting her, and Mira entered. Inside, she found herself in a garden like no other. There were flowers of every kind, daisies that shimmered with flecks of silver, roses that opened and closed with the ticking of an invisible clock, and sunflowers that gently turned their faces toward the moon instead of the sun. A narrow pathway wound between the garden beds, and each step Mira took echoed slightly, as if she were walking through time itself. At the heart of the garden stood a small wooden cottage, nestled beneath a towering weeping willow whose branches ticked softly like pendulums. The air smelled of lavender and parchment, of brass and rain, old and comforting. Just outside the cottage sat a man on a stool, surrounded by pots of blooming tulips shaped like hourglasses. His hair was silver, his eyes deep as the midnight sky, and in his lap was a pocket watch he was gently winding. He looked up and smiled, as if Mira were a granddaughter returning from a long journey. "You've come at just the right hour," he said, his voice smooth and warm, like the hush before sleep. "Time's been waiting for you." Mira approached with quiet curiosity. "Who are you?" "Some call me the clockmaker," he replied. "But I don't make clocks anymore. I plant time, and I let it grow." He gestured toward the garden beds. Each flower, Mira realized, had a faint glow at its center, and within that glow, tiny scenes played out like memories. One flower held the image of a child's first laugh. Another, the silent beauty of a snowfall in a sleeping town. A third shimmered with the image of a couple dancing in their living room long after the music had stopped. "These are moments people forget to remember," the clockmaker explained. "So I keep them here, growing gently. Waiting to be noticed again." He stood and motioned for Mira to follow him down a winding path deeper into the garden. With every turn, the flowers grew stranger and more beautiful, bluebells chimed like tiny clocks, vines hummed softly, and dandelions spun their seeds in slow motion, suspended midair. "This place," he said, "reminds us that time isn't a race, it's a rhythm." He stopped beside a tree shaped like an old grandfather clock, its leaves falling in a steady, ticking cadence. "Would you like to plant a moment, Mira?" She nodded. The clockmaker reached into his satchel and pulled out a tiny seed shaped like a watch face. "Close your eyes," he instructed gently. "And think of a time you felt truly calm." Mira breathed in and remembered. The warmth of her grandmother's shawl wrapped around her on a cold morning. The soft scratch of a record playing a lullaby from another era. A cup of chamomile tea shared in quiet after a long day. When she opened her eyes, the seed in her palm had begun to glow. She knelt and placed it into the soil. Within seconds, a delicate flower sprouted, pale blue with gold at its heart. Inside its bloom, the memory shimmered softly, a forever kept moment of calm. The clockmaker smiled. Now it will always be here, whenever you need to remember. They sat in silence for a while, just listening to the garden breathe. Eventually, the lantern floated closer, its glow a little stronger now, like it knew the time had come to move again. Mira stood, and the clockmaker offered her a small, golden key. Not for a door, he said. But for a moment. Keep it close. She tucked it into the pocket of her robe and looked back once more at the garden of time, where every flower bloomed in peace. Then, with a soft wave, she stepped back through the vine gate. The flowers didn't wilt as she left. They ticked gently. They hummed quietly. They waited, like time does, for her to return. Crescent moon. The mountain of dreams. The garden gate closed behind Mira with the softest sigh, and as she turned, the landscape had transformed again. A path of silver dust rose before her, gently winding upward. In the distance, under a velvet sky dusted with stars, loomed a tall and shimmering mountain. But this was no ordinary mountain. Its slopes shimmered as if made of stardust and moonlight. And though its peak disappeared into a wisp of clouds, the air felt light and inviting. Not daunting, but sacred. The lantern floated ahead, casting a soft circle of light onto the path as Mira began her climb. The first steps were gentle. Grasses whispered under her feet, and tiny flowers blinked open like sleepy eyes. Along the sides of the trail, tall white feathers grew like reeds, swaying without wind. It was peaceful. Still. Quiet. But not for long. Soon, the air began to shimmer, as if she were walking through heat, except it wasn't hot. It was dreamlight. Then Mira saw them. Dreams. They moved around her like mist, not frightening, but strange and wonderful. Scenes playing in delicate bubbles. A child running barefoot through autumn leaves. A baker pulling warm bread from a stone oven. A violinist playing to a room of flickering candlelight. Each dream hovered briefly before fading into the stardust air. Mira walked through them like one might walk through memories. The climb steepened gently, but the path remained welcoming. And the higher she went, the deeper the dreams became. Now, they were more than images. She began to feel them. A dream of floating in the sky filled her body with lightness. A dream of a warm embrace wrapped her in unseen arms. A dream of a single piano key, played over and over, made her eyes sting with tears she didn't quite understand. She stopped for a moment, resting on a large, smooth stone along the trail. It pulsed softly beneath her, like a heartbeat. As she breathed in, the mountain exhaled, not wind, but emotion. Longing. Hope. Comfort. That's when she realized. This mountain didn't just hold dreams. It was dreams. Each stone, each flower, each gust of wind was woven from sleeping hearts and resting minds. She continued upward. Eventually, the path split in two. One route led through a field of dreams that danced and sparkled, bright and joyful. The other dipped into a quiet hollow, where shadows moved softly and dreams curled gently inward. Her lantern paused between the two paths, then slowly floated toward the quieter way. Mira followed. Here, the dreams were more solemn, not sad, but restful. A child curled in a window seat, clutching a stuffed bear. A man watching snow fall outside a train window. A woman holding a photograph to her chest, eyes closed, lips smiling. It was a lullaby of stillness. At the center of the hollow, Mira found a shallow pool. Its surface reflected the night sky, but as she knelt to look closer, she saw more than stars. She saw herself. But not as she was now. She saw the child she used to be, laughing beneath a quilt fort. She saw the teenager who whispered poems into her notebook. She saw the young woman learning to be still in a loud world. And finally, she saw her present self, calm, breathing, and full of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. The lantern bobbed beside her, its golden light reflected in the pool. Mira dipped her fingers into the water. The surface rippled, and from it rose a single, floating dream, one of her own. It showed her walking forward, eyes closed, smiling. Into places yet unseen. Toward stars not yet named. It hovered for a moment, then drifted upward, joining the others in the sky. The mountain had taken it, not to keep, but to remember. To hold, just in case she ever forgot. As Mira stood to leave, the trail curved again, now rising toward the clouds that crowned the mountain's peak. The dreams around her began to grow lighter, sleepier, gentler, like lullabies drifting toward the end of their melody. And so, Mira climbed on, her heart full of every dream she had witnessed, her feet light with purpose. Somewhere above, the sky was waiting. And so was the next part of her journey. Crescent moon. The library in the clouds. The air grew softer as Mira climbed. The stars above seemed closer, and the mountain trail beneath her feet turned from stone to something like powdered moonlight, silky, silent, and cool. The lantern at her side pulsed gently, guiding her higher still. Just ahead, the trail ended at a cloud. Not a misty veil or passing fog, a true cloud, dense and glowing, suspended in the air like a dream made solid. Without hesitation, Mira stepped into it. The moment her foot touched the cloud, she felt a tingling warmth rise through her toes, up her spine, and into her chest. The cloud held her weight as surely as stone, but each step gave slightly, like walking on freshly fallen snow. When she emerged from the center of the cloud, Mira gasped. Before her stood a grand structure, a vast, circular building built entirely from glass and starlight. Towers stretched into the sky, and balconies floated gently in the air like drifting petals. This was no ordinary building. It was a library. The library in the clouds. Mira approached its entrance, a pair of arching golden doors etched with constellations. The lantern floated ahead and hovered above a star-shaped crest on the ground. A quiet hum began, low and melodious, and the doors slowly opened inward. Inside, the air smelled of parchment, lavender, and dreams. Rows of shelves extended as far as the eye could see, filled with glowing books, some small and quiet, others large and radiant. Each book pulsed faintly with light, as though breathing. As she stepped inside, Mira was met by a gentle figure, a woman draped in robes of deep midnight blue. Her hair floated as if underwater, and her eyes glimmered like twin moons. "Welcome, Dreamwalker," she said softly. "You've come far." "Where am I?" Mira asked, in a hush, afraid to disturb the serenity. "You stand within the library of dreams," the woman replied. "Every dream that's ever been dreamt rests on these shelves. Every sigh of slumber. Every whispered wish. Every moment your soul forgot it remembered." Mira turned slowly, eyes wide. "All this, dreamed by the world?" The woman led her through the vast halls. "Each book belongs to someone, written by their sleeping mind, kept safe here forever. Some visit only once in a lifetime. A few never return. But others, like you, walk among their own dreams." They stopped before a low, glowing shelf. "Here," the woman said gently, "are your dreams." Mira knelt before the row of books. Each one bore her name in delicate silver script. She reached for a small violet volume and opened it. A dream spilled into her mind, vivid and tender. She saw herself riding a bicycle through a field of golden poppies. A gentle rain fell, and a voice, her mother's, sang an old lullaby behind her. She hadn't remembered this dream until now. It made her eyes glisten. She closed the book and placed it back with care. "Do dreams ever fade?" Mira asked. The woman nodded. "Some are forgotten for a time. But they're never truly lost. The library remembers, even when we don't." They moved on. In one chamber, entire stories floated midair, spinning slowly like planets. In another, Mira watched paintings form from dreams, each brushstroke a memory, a hope, a sliver of rest. There were gardens where dandelions bloomed from sleepy thoughts, and fountains that whispered lullabies in languages only the heart could understand. Eventually, they arrived at a staircase made of clouds. It spiraled upward, through an atrium of stars. "This is where you must go next," the woman said. "But take this." She handed Mira a single page torn from a book. On it was written, "When you are lost, let your dreams lead you home." Mira held it close. The lantern rose beside her, ready to ascend. As she climbed, she looked back one last time at the endless shelves, the glowing books, and the keeper of dreams smiling gently beneath the starlight. Then she disappeared upward, into the clouds. She had more to see. More to feel. More to remember. And high above, the next part of the journey waited. Crescent moon. The sky mirror lake. The cloud staircase slowly faded behind Mira as she descended into a hushed celestial valley. Below her, a shimmering lake spread out like a perfect mirror, reflecting the cosmos above so clearly that it was nearly impossible to tell where the sky ended and the water began. It was as though the stars had pooled into a gentle basin. The path down was soft and spongy, like moss lit from within. Fireflies drifted around her, their lights pulsing in time with her breath, each one a tiny lantern of the night. As Mira neared the edge of the lake, the lantern by her side dimmed slightly, as if in reverence. The stillness here was unlike anything she had felt before, not silence, but serenity. The kind of quiet that lets the soul hear its own music. She knelt at the shore, and the surface of the lake shimmered beneath her gaze. At first, she saw only her reflection, eyes wide, breath slow, hair drifting like mist. But then the image began to change. She saw herself standing beneath trees made of crystal, laughing with a child whose face was strangely familiar. She saw herself walking through falling snow, her hand held in another's, someone whose presence radiated warmth. She saw herself older, wiser, surrounded by people, each one glowing with gentle light. These were not memories. They were possibilities. "The sky mirror lake reflects not what was," said a gentle voice, "but what may be." Mira turned. A man stood a few feet away, tall and calm, his robes the color of moonlight on water. His eyes held the same starlit depth as the lake itself. "Are they visions of the future?" she asked softly. "They are dreams," he replied. "Futures you carry within you, ones your heart has whispered while your mind was resting." He gestured toward the lake. "Not all will come to pass. But all are true in their own way." Mira watched as the lake shimmered again. This time, she saw a field of wildflowers beneath a lavender sky, a notebook in her hands. She was writing, but the words seemed to bloom off the page like petals. She smiled, content and peaceful. "Can I choose which dreams become real?" she asked. "You can choose the path," the man said. "The dreams, they bloom along the way." He walked beside her, hands behind his back. "The lake listens, you know. If you speak to it, it may respond." Mira glanced back at the mirrored water. She leaned forward, her lips just above the surface, and whispered a single wish. "Let me find the place where I truly belong." The lake stilled. Then a ripple, small and delicate, spread outward. In its wake, a new image rose. It was a place she didn't recognize, a valley wrapped in mist, where tall trees bowed under the weight of blossoms that glowed in the dark. A cottage stood there, small and warm. Light flickered in its window. She felt something stir in her chest, a memory she hadn't lived yet. The man beside her smiled. "That place exists," he said. "Not here, not now. But someday, if your path leads true." Mira nodded, her eyes soft with wonder. "I'll find it," she said. And then the lantern floated ahead again, brighter now, as if renewed by her choice. She stepped carefully into a tiny boat waiting at the lake's edge, carved from a single pearl-like shell. The man pushed her gently from the shore. "Let the reflections guide you," he said. "But do not chase them. Walk your path, and they will come to you." As the boat glided silently across the mirrored surface, Mira looked down at the sky reflected below and above, surrounded by stars, dreams, and echoes of what might be. She closed her eyes. And with the hush of the water and the softness of night, she drifted into a sleep deeper than any before. Somewhere beyond the lake, the next part of her journey awaited. Crescent moon. The whispers of the wind trees. The gentle rocking of the pearl boat lulled Mira into a peaceful doze, and when she awoke, the boat had come to a rest along a mossy riverbank. A soft mist floated through the air, carrying with it the sweet scent of jasmine and pine. Above her, an enchanted forest stretched high into the sky. These were no ordinary trees. Their trunks shimmered with a faint silver glow, and their leaves sparkled as if dusted with stars. But the most magical thing of all was the sound. The entire forest sang. Not loudly, but in the softest harmonies, like a chorus carried on a breeze. The leaves rustled in sync, and the branches creaked gently as if whispering lullabies from ancient times. There was no wind, and yet the trees moved. Mira stepped onto the shore and immediately felt embraced, not by arms, but by presence. The kind of presence that comes from something alive and knowing. These trees were sentient. They felt her arrival. "Welcome, child of dreams," a voice hummed from nowhere and everywhere. Mira paused, her heart skipping. Who said that? The trees rustled in response. Not in alarm, in greeting. The tallest tree closest to her bent its branches just slightly. Its bark rearranged subtly until it formed the shape of gentle eyes and a smiling mouth. "We are the wind trees," it said in a melodic tone, "and we remember all who walk through dreams." Mira smiled. "Then, you know me?" "We do," the tree replied. "You've been here before, in thought, in hope, in sleep. Not all who enter this forest hear us, but you have always listened." She walked forward, touching the smooth bark of another tree. It vibrated gently beneath her fingers, humming softly in a minor key. "Why do you sing?" she asked. "To soothe the wandering souls," the trees answered in unison. "To remind those who travel far from home that they are never truly lost. Every leaf remembers. Every branch holds memory." Mira let her hand fall. "Do you know where my journey ends?" "That," said the tree with a low creak, "is not the question you should ask." "Then what is?" Mira whispered. The leaves above shimmered, rustling like rain. "Ask where it begins," they answered. She paused, thoughtful. The question settled in her chest like a seed ready to bloom. As she walked deeper into the forest, the trees parted willingly. Each one bowed its limbs slightly to make way for her. Some even dropped glowing petals, soft as snowflakes, to light her path. She passed beneath an arched bough, and a new melody began, deeper, slower, resonating through her ribs like a cello's tone. It was a story, sung in wind. The trees were telling her a tale. The song spoke of a little girl who dreamed too much, who spoke to stars and wandered off in her sleep. A girl who one day would grow into a woman whose dreams wove tapestries of other worlds, who would become a guide for others, helping them find sleep, peace, and hope. Mira's breath caught in her throat. They were singing her story. "How do you know these things?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Because we are made of dreams," the trees replied. "We are the keepers of what lies between slumber and waking. You are not the first, but you may be the first in a long time." "First to what?" "To remember." Mira stood still. The breeze picked up, soft, slow, warm, and lifted her hair from her shoulders. It circled around her, carrying the scents of old forests, sweet tea, and home. Then she heard one final whisper, clearer than before. Trust the path. It knows your name. The forest ahead grew lighter. A golden glow filtered through the leaves. Mira felt her heart swell, not with answers, but with clarity. Not every question needed a reply. Some only needed faith. With the lullaby of the wind trees behind her, she followed the golden light toward whatever came next, her hand on the lantern, her dreams humming in harmony with the ancient song. Crescent moon. The golden bridge of memories. Mira emerged from the whispering woods with the trees' song still echoing in her heart. The golden light that had shimmered through the leaves now opened into a wide glade, and just beyond it, she saw something extraordinary. A bridge. It stretched across a misty ravine, suspended by nothing at all, no ropes, no beams, no supports. It glowed softly, as though made from threads of moonlight and sunlight woven together. The surface shimmered beneath her eyes like 1,000 dancing fireflies frozen mid-flight. This was no ordinary bridge. It was made of memories. Mira stepped forward hesitantly, her feet landing softly on the glowing path. As soon as she did, the bridge beneath her shimmered more brightly, and a soft hum surrounded her, not of wind, but of remembrance. The air changed. And then, so did the world around her. With each step, a memory unfolded beside her like a delicate painting. To her left, a small version of herself, no older than 6. Sat curled in her grandmother's lap, listening to a bedtime story as rain tapped gently on the window. The warmth of the blanket, the scent of her grandmother's rose-scented lotion, the sound of her voice, they wrapped around Mira now like a second skin. She smiled and took another step. To the right, a scene from her teenage years appeared. She was in a small bookstore, fingers tracing the spines of well-loved novels, finding stories that would help her sleep on nights when the world felt too loud. She saw herself escape into pages, but also grow stronger from the words they gave her. Another step. She now saw her first heartbreak. A tearful goodbye beneath gray skies. But strangely, there was no pain watching it now, only understanding. Growth. She saw how she carried herself afterward, the quiet strength she didn't know she had. More steps. A time she failed. A time she succeeded. A time she stood up for someone who needed a voice. A time she didn't, and later wished she had. All the moments played out around her, soft and shimmering like dreams. And as she continued walking, Mira noticed something more profound. Each memory glowed differently. The joyful ones sparkled like sunlight dancing on water. The painful ones glowed like candlelight in the dark, soft, flickering, but still warm. They were not there to shame her or haunt her. They were there to remind her that she had lived. Every sorrow had shaped her. Every joy had lifted her. Even her moments of silence had taught her the value of voice. The golden bridge began to rise slightly, lifting her above the misty ravine. The view widened. She could now see stars twinkling far above, not in the sky, but suspended in the air around her, as if each one were a memory waiting to fall gently into place. At the bridge's center stood a figure. She was cloaked in gold and starlight, with hair like falling autumn leaves and a gaze like the moon over calm water. "You've walked well," the woman said. Her voice was neither young nor old, it simply was. "Who are you?" Mira asked. "I am memory," the woman said gently. "But not as you think. I am not what was. I am what remains." Mira nodded, her throat tight. "Why did you show me all this?" "So you remember," memory whispered, stepping closer, "that your story is still being written, and that it has always mattered." She reached out and touched Mira's heart with a single glowing finger. A gentle warmth bloomed there, like golden honey trickling through her chest. Mira closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she was past the center of the bridge. The figure of memory had vanished, or perhaps merged with the stars around her. But the glow in her chest remained. As she reached the far end of the bridge, the mist parted completely. Ahead lay rolling hills under a sky bathed in soft lavender hues. The lantern by her side pulsed once, like it, too, had seen what she'd seen. Mira paused for just a moment, turning back to the golden bridge. She whispered, "Thank you." Then turned forward once more. And with a heart full of memory and light, she stepped onto the path ahead, ready for the next chapter of her voyage. Crescent moon. The meadow of forgotten wishes. The golden bridge faded behind her, its glowing threads dissolving into the morning mist. Ahead, Mira found herself walking a soft, grassy path that wound through a gentle valley. The sun was low in the sky, painting everything in hues of rose and apricot. Birds with feathers of sapphire and gold sang songs too beautiful to remember, songs that lived only in the heart, not in words. The air here was different. Thicker somehow, but sweet. As if it were saturated with memories of dreams that had once been whispered into the night and then forgotten by morning. As she crested a low hill, Mira gasped softly. Below her stretched a vast meadow, a place so impossibly serene that it seemed to hum with peace itself. But more than that, it was alive. Not just with flowers, though thousands bloomed in every color imaginable, but with light, warmth, and something deeply emotional. Each flower pulsed softly like a tiny heartbeat, their petals shimmering with a soft glow. As Mira stepped into the field, a gentle breeze stirred the blossoms, and she realized. These were not ordinary flowers. They were wishes. Forgotten ones. Wishes made and never spoken. Hopes whispered and never chased. Childhood dreams set aside. Prayers given up. Promises made in secret and never fulfilled. Each bloom represented a longing once held, and then left behind. Mira walked slowly through the meadow, feeling the petals brush her fingertips. Some flowers sang soft lullabies. Others hummed old lullabies, lullabies no mother remembered singing. Some trembled gently, as if hoping to be remembered. She knelt beside a small blue blossom that shimmered like moonlight on water. As she touched it, a gentle voice echoed in her mind. "I wish I could fly." A child's voice. Pure. Innocent. Hopeful. Mira smiled, tears in her eyes. She whispered back, "I hope you still believe it's possible." She moved to a cluster of bright golden blooms. One trembled as she reached it. "I wish they knew I was trying." Mira's breath caught in her chest. Another whisper. This one more fragile. "I wish I could tell her I loved her before she left." Mira pressed her hands to her heart, overwhelmed by the love, the ache, the beauty of all the dreams that had once lived in someone's heart. She had never known that a place like this could exist, where the forgotten dreams of the world found a home. It wasn't sad, not entirely. It was reverent. Quietly powerful. And then. She found hers. It was small. Delicate. A violet blossom curled in upon itself, trembling at her approach. Mira knelt slowly. She didn't have to touch it to know. She remembered the wish before the flower could even speak it. "I wish I could become who I'm meant to be." She closed her eyes and sat beside it. It was the wish she'd made when she was barely 10 years old, lying on the roof of her house, staring at the stars. She remembered it clearly, the ache, the fire, the feeling that something far greater was calling her, even if she didn't know what it was. That dream had lived inside her all along. She just hadn't visited it in a long time. "I'm still becoming," she whispered. "But I haven't forgotten you." The violet blossom pulsed warmly, and slowly, its petals unfurled, not into a flower, but into a tiny glowing orb. It rose gently into the air, then hovered before her before settling into the lantern she carried. The light within her lantern grew brighter. One wish remembered. One truth reclaimed. From across the meadow, a soft chime rang out, not from bells, but from nature itself. The wind. The grass. The wishes. They were singing now. Softly, gently, in celebration. And in that moment, Mira knew. This journey wasn't just about traveling to some distant place. It was about returning to parts of herself she'd left behind. One by one, wish by wish, memory by memory, she was becoming whole. She stood up slowly, brushing the dew from her fingers. Around her, the meadow of forgotten wishes shimmered brighter now, not in grief, but in joy. With the lantern glowing steady by her side, Mira took a final glance across the field of forgotten dreams and whispered, "I won't forget again." Then, with her steps light and her heart stronger than ever, she followed the winding path out of the valley, toward the next mystery that awaited her. The house that waited forever. The meadow of forgotten wishes slowly disappeared behind Mira, its light fading like a lullaby into morning mist. The air shifted as she walked. Warmer now, with the scent of wood smoke and something older still, like parchment and polished oak. Ahead, nestled at the foot of two gentle hills, stood a small house. It was wrapped in ivy and thyme. The roof, though mossy, held firm. The windows, though dusty, caught the light like forgotten diamonds. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, not gray, but soft lavender, as if the fire inside were dreaming too. The door creaked open as Mira approached. Not from the wind. From invitation. She stepped inside. It was warm. Inside, the walls were lined with books. Shelves reached from the floor to the ceiling, each holding volumes bound in deep blues, muted golds, and silver-veined green. A spiral staircase led up to a loft where a bed, perfectly made, rested under a canopy of soft twinkling lights. Mira didn't know how, but she felt it immediately. This place remembered her. She walked slowly through the main room. A tea kettle steamed gently over the hearth. A rocking chair moved faintly, though no one sat in it. On the long table by the window, a half-written letter lay beside a fountain pen, the ink still wet, as if someone had just paused mid-sentence. "Dearest one, if you've come this far, then I knew you'd find your way." Mira reached out to trace the handwriting, and as her fingers brushed the parchment, time seemed to fold around her like a blanket. And suddenly, she was there. Not a dream, not a memory, but there, in that moment, years ago. She was a child again, curled beside a woman in the same rocking chair. The woman hummed a tune Mira had not heard in years, something soft and wordless, like honey spilling slowly from a spoon. Her mother. Not as Mira remembered from the hospital bed, frail and fading. But strong. Whole. Timeless. She didn't speak. She simply smiled. Mira reached for her, and the room shimmered again. The candlelight flickered brighter, then softer. The air settled like dust on ancient pages. Back in the present, she stood alone once more. Yet not quite. Because the warmth remained. Not just in the room, in her. There was a framed picture now on the mantel that hadn't been there before. Mira walked over and saw it, herself, as she was today, standing beside her mother on the porch of the house. Both smiling. Beneath it was a note. "You carry me in every step. Keep walking." She sat on the rocking chair and let the house breathe around her. It was a place out of time. A space between longing and peace. Not meant to hold her forever, just to remind her that love never truly leaves. That memory is not a ghost, but a guest. One who visits softly, to warm the heart. Outside, twilight had fallen again. The sky was dusted with indigo and pale lilac. The lantern at Mira's side pulsed once, then twice, now brighter, infused with love remembered, not mourned. She stood, ran her hand one last time along the bookshelf, and stepped outside. The house behind her didn't vanish. It simply waited, as it always had, as it always would. For the next time it was needed. For the next heart that needed reminding. With her heart lighter, her steps calmer, Mira returned to the path. A breeze played with her hair, and somewhere in the sky above, a lullaby echoed, one she now remembered clearly. "You're never walking alone," it seemed to say. Crescent moon. The island in the clouds. The path stretched onward, wrapped in twilight and soft starlight. Mira walked quietly, the memory of the house and her mother's presence still warming her chest like a quiet ember. The trees thinned, the wind picked up, and the air grew cooler, higher. Lighter. Before her, nestled between hills that sloped like sleepy giants, stood a wide, round stone platform etched with glowing runes. At the center rested a large feather, not from any bird Mira knew, shimmering silver, nearly the length of her arm. The lantern at her side pulsed. A soft hum rose from the platform. She stepped into its center. The runes lit one by one. A gentle wind spiraled upward, circling Mira until her feet left the ground, not with force, but with grace. She was being lifted. Upward, upward, through the softest mist, into a sky painted with deep blue velvet and rivers of stars. Clouds curled like petals around her. They moved with intention, parting like curtains to reveal a floating island, massive and weightless, suspended in the sky. It shimmered as if woven from moonlight and memory. Mira drifted gently down onto its surface. The clouds beneath her feet were firm yet soft, like walking on warm wool. Trees with translucent leaves lined quiet pathways. The sky above was close, intimate, as if the stars leaned in to listen. This was a place where thoughts whispered too softly to be heard on earth were collected and kept. A dreamkeeper's realm. As she walked, clouds shaped themselves into familiar forms, moments she had lived, forgotten, or dreamed. A cloud formed into her childhood dog, bounding toward her. Another into her old bedroom window, glowing from within. Yet another became the book she used to read every night under the covers, lit by a flashlight. The island was full of dreams. Some drifting free, others gathered into orbs of light. Mira paused beside one, a shimmering pearl cloud hovering just inches above the ground. She touched it. Suddenly, the world shifted. She stood inside a dream that was hers, but one she never remembered. She was sailing a ship made of feathers through a sky full of golden birds. Her laughter echoed freely, and around her were constellations forming words, "You are not lost. You are learning the sky." The dream faded, and she returned to the cloud island. Mira wandered deeper, into a grove where the clouds were thin and starlight touched the ground. There sat a figure, tall, cloaked in mist, surrounded by floating scrolls and cloud-bound books. The Dreamkeeper. Though their face was hidden, the voice that spoke was clear, calm, eternal. "Dreams are more than sleep's theater," the Dreamkeeper said. "They are maps. Messages. Reminders. You've come far, Mira." Mira bowed her head. "But I still don't know where I'm going." The Dreamkeeper reached toward her, and in their palm formed a scroll. "You've been gathering your way forward all along," they said. "Each place, each memory, each dream, it is all part of the story you are writing, even while you sleep." Mira took the scroll. It wasn't written in ink, but light. And though the words made no sense to her eyes, her heart understood every single one. "You are the journey," it said. "You are the map, the traveler, and the destination." The Dreamkeeper smiled. "Take this with you. When the path feels uncertain, open it beneath the stars. It will guide you not with direction, but with truth." Mira tucked the scroll gently into her satchel. The lantern at her side glowed golden now, pulsing with the energy of 1,000 dreams remembered and honored. The clouds began to swirl again, curling into a spiral staircase that led back downward, slowly returning her to the world below. As she descended, the island faded behind her, becoming part of the sky once more. But its message remained. She touched the scroll and whispered, "Thank you." Stars twinkled in reply. Crescent moon. The mirror of the moon. The land below was quiet again as Mira stepped gently onto a silver-lit path, the Dreamkeeper's scroll nestled safely in her satchel. Her lantern, now glowing steadily, cast a soft ring of golden light that danced beside her with each step. She felt different. Not in body, but in spirit, like the pieces of her heart were slowly rearranging into something whole. Ahead, the landscape changed once more. The trees gave way to tall white grasses that whispered in the wind. Crickets chirped like lullabies. The stars above moved in slow procession, guiding her to the edge of a still, circular lake, perfectly smooth, glowing softly under the moonlight. Mira knelt at the water's edge. This was no ordinary lake. Its surface wasn't water exactly, it was more like liquid glass, infused with moonlight and memory. A sign stood beside it, written in curling script that shimmered like frost. "Be still, and you shall see. Not who you are, but all you might become." Mira leaned forward and looked into the mirror of the moon. At first, her own reflection stared back, her tired eyes, her steady breath, the lantern at her side. But then, it changed. The image deepened. She saw herself standing at the top of a mountain, laughing freely as wind swept through her hair. She saw herself dancing in a crowded square under lantern light, surrounded by strangers who somehow felt like family. She saw herself weeping with joy as she hugged an older version of her father, who stood beside her with love in his eyes and time behind him. Then the mirror changed again. She saw a version of herself walking alone, older, wiser, calm. She carried no lantern, but she radiated light from within. Trees bent toward her as she passed. Children laughed in her wake. Animals watched her with reverence. And finally, she saw herself asleep, in a cozy room lit by firelight, a peaceful smile on her lips. Outside the window, the moon shone full, and the stars above her bed spelled out, "You have always been enough." A tear slipped down Mira's cheek. This mirror didn't lie. It didn't flatter or frighten. It simply offered a truth she had often forgotten, that the potential within her was infinite, if only she would trust herself enough to see it. She whispered, "Thank you," to the water. The lake shimmered in reply. At that moment, a quiet splash rippled across the surface. From beneath the mirrored water, a figure rose, not made of flesh, but light and mist. It was her. Not quite a twin, but a glowing echo. Her inner self, formed of calm strength and radiant peace. The figure did not speak. It simply extended its hand. Mira reached out and touched it. A warmth spread through her body, from fingertip to sole. Her reflection slowly faded back into the lake, leaving behind a glowing silver pendant in her palm, a small disc shaped like the moon, etched with her own name in stars. She placed it around her neck. The moment it touched her skin, the pendant warmed and pulsed once, then fell still. But Mira knew it would never stop glowing inside her. She rose to her feet. Behind her, the grasses whispered encouragement. The lake resumed its perfect stillness. And above her, the moon moved higher, brighter, a guardian watching with quiet pride. Mira continued down the path once more. She was no longer just walking through a dream. She was walking toward the version of herself she had always hoped to become. Crescent moon. The garden of quiet answers. With the silver pendant resting softly against her heart, Mira continued onward beneath the moon's watchful glow. Each step along the winding path felt softer now, not because the ground had changed, but because she had. Something inside her had quieted, and in that silence, she found space for peace. The trail led her to a low stone arch wrapped in vines that shimmered faintly in the starlight. Inscribed in its curve were words as soft as breath. Here, the questions you carry will finally speak. Mira passed beneath the archway and entered the garden of quiet answers. It was vast, yet intimate, a secret world of stillness. The air here was hushed and warm. Candle-like blossoms lit the pathways, their petals glowing with a soft inner light. Trees shaped like open hands grew along the edges, their leaves fluttering like paper. At the garden's heart, a circular bench carved of pale stone encircled a shallow pool, its surface smooth as silk. She took a seat. A hush fell. Deeper than silence. Not empty, just waiting. Mira closed her eyes. And slowly, softly, the questions she had carried for so long rose like feathers in her mind. Why did she leave so early? Will I ever feel truly safe again? Was it my fault? What if I'm not enough? Each question floated gently from her heart into the space around her. And one by one, the garden answered. But not with voices. With sensations. With knowing. The tree beside her rustled gently, and she felt a message in its rhythm. Love does not vanish. It changes form. She is still with you, in every step you take. The wind curled around her shoulders, warm as an embrace. Safety lives in moments. You've already built more of them than you know. The water in the pool rippled, mirroring her reflection with unusual clarity. No, it was never your fault. Pain has reasons, but not blame. And finally, the flowers around her opened fully, releasing a faint golden glow that bathed her in warmth. You are more than enough. You always were. Tears came, not from sorrow, but from recognition. This place didn't fix what was broken. It simply reminded her that not everything needed fixing. That being human was not a flaw, but a garden, full of shadow and bloom. She remained there for a long time, resting in the softness of the moment. No rush. No noise. Just a quiet truth that wrapped around her like a blanket on a cold night. When she finally rose, the garden seemed to smile. The flowers bowed. The trees stilled. The pool sent one final ripple, catching the moonlight just so, a gentle farewell. Mira stepped back onto the path. But now, she carried more than her lantern and pendant. She carried forgiveness. She carried grace. She carried answers, not loud and final, but soft and lasting. And above her, the stars blinked, as if whispering. There is wisdom in the quiet. Crescent moon. The library of forgotten tomorrows. As Mira left the garden behind, a breeze brushed her cheek. Soft and cool, like the turning page of a well-loved book. The landscape ahead shimmered with twilight hues, and in the distance, something massive and majestic rose from the horizon. A tower. Or perhaps, a tree. It was both, a tree grown into a towering spiral, its bark carved with windows and shelves. Lanterns floated around it like fireflies, and letters made of stardust circled its crown. At its root stood a bronze plaque. The Library of Forgotten Tomorrows. Where futures once dreamed still wait. Mira stepped inside. The scent of old paper, candle wax, and starlight filled her lungs. The interior glowed softly, rows upon rows of shelves arched skyward, spiraling upward into an infinite dome. Each shelf held books bound in soft fabrics, their titles written in silver thread. The time you almost learned to dance. The letter you never sent. The city you nearly moved to. The day you would have said yes. The dream you let slip away. Mira wandered, breathless. None of these books judged her. None accused. They simply were, stories that could have been, still waiting to be remembered. One book stood out. It was small, bound in indigo velvet, pulsing faintly like it still had something to say. Its title read, "The Tomorrow You Still Might Live." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. There, etched in golden ink, was a scene she'd never lived, but immediately recognized. She was standing on a stage, not as an actor, but as a storyteller. A sea of gentle faces sat before her, listening. Crying. Laughing. Healing. She read from a book she'd written, one she hadn't yet begun. Next page, she was walking through a forest with a child. Her own child. Telling bedtime stories, their hands clasped. Their laughter rising like wind in the trees. Then, she stood on a cliff, older, wiser, watching the ocean, content, fulfilled. Her pendant still hung around her neck, glowing gently. Mira closed the book slowly, pressing it to her heart. Tears glistened in her eyes, not of regret, but possibility. This wasn't a reminder of what she'd missed. It was an invitation to remember what was still waiting. She turned, and noticed a figure in the distance. The librarian. Not old, not young, with eyes like wells of time and robes made of shifting words. They offered her a knowing smile. "These tomorrows do not vanish," the librarian said. "They simply wait. Some bloom. Some pass. Some come back around when you're ready." Mira nodded. "I think I'm ready now." The librarian handed her the velvet-bound book. "Then carry it with you. Not to live every tomorrow, but to remember that each step forward is a new page." She tucked the book beside the Dreamkeeper's scroll. Together, they hummed in harmony. And as she stepped out of the library, the stars seemed brighter, closer, a constellation forming above her that looked like a doorway, just beginning to open. The final part of her voyage lay ahead. Crescent moon. The return and the awakening. Mira stood beneath the vast night sky, the library of forgotten tomorrows glowing behind her like a lighthouse of memory. The indigo book rested in her satchel beside the Dreamkeeper's scroll, and the silver moon pendant warmed softly at her heart. The path ahead had changed. There were no signs, no torches, no trail. Just an open field under stars, soft grass, dandelions glowing gently like lanterns. The sky had shifted to dawn's edge, a lavender blue where stars whispered goodbye and morning waited on the horizon. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Each step felt both lighter and fuller. The dreams she had gathered, the answers, the memories, the what-ifs, all wove together inside her like threads forming something whole. She walked for what felt like a moment, or a lifetime. And then, she saw it. The archway of woven branches, the one she'd passed through on the first night of her journey. Only now, it was blooming with tiny blossoms, pale blue, silver, and gold. Etched above it were new words, glowing gently in the early light. All dreams end. But some begin again, as waking truth. She stepped through. And in that instant, a great peace fell over her. The dream did not dissolve. It didn't vanish or blur. Instead, it folded gently inward, like petals closing at dusk, and settled softly into her heart. Mira awoke in her bed. The morning sun peeked through her curtains. A breeze stirred the edge of her blanket. The scent of something sweet, like night-blooming jasmine, lingered in the air, though no flowers were near. She sat up slowly. Everything was as it had been, and yet, nothing was quite the same. Her lantern sat beside her bed. Impossible, and yet, there it was. On her desk lay a blank notebook, and beside it, a single indigo feather. The same shade as the book in the library. And around her neck, resting against her skin, the silver pendant. Warm. Mira smiled. She rose, stretched, and stepped toward the window. The world was awake now, birds singing, leaves dancing in the breeze. But in her mind, the music of the Fae folk still played. The laughter of the elves echoed faintly. The image of the dragons painting fire in the sky shimmered behind her eyes. She carried them all. Every dream. And now, she would begin again. With her pen. With her voice. With her whole heart. Because the sleepwalker's voyage had not truly ended. It had simply opened the door to her next story. Crescent Moon.